I talked about dentistry. I made the point that dentistry may not win a political party a general election, but it could just cost them one. And it seems to me this is a theme that is worth coming back to as we learn that 80% of the country find it literally impossible to get an NHS dentist. And if you go private, well, the bills can be absolutely enormous. Well, joining me is Neil Carmichael, Chair of the Association of Dental Groups and a former Conservative Member of Parliament, and John Northfield, a patient unable to get an NHS dentist for 2 years, who is now travelling 200 miles to get an NHS dentist. Neil, you're closely involved with the dental industry. I mean, in terms of the National Health Service providing dentistry, it seems to me it's virtually over.
Well, no, it's not, because what we've got to do instead is focus on the real cause of the problem, and that is definitely recruitment. Now, John is right. He lives in an area which we've identified as a dental desert.
Now, John, you're living in Devon.
Yeah, I am living there.
You're living in Devon.
North Devon, yeah.
And you've moved to down to North Devon, and you've tried to get an NHS dentist
for 2 years. Yeah, I've lived there 2 years. Cannot get a dentist within a 30-mile radius of where we live, and I did have to travel back to Bromley some time ago for my wife. She had a bad problem with her tooth.
Yep.
Had to be cut out over in West Wickham. We went to a specialist place our dentist sent us to, and we are still, that was about a year ago she went for special treatment over there. Was very pleased with the treatment she got in Bromley, but the dentist we was under there said he does feel that England seems to be going to like a third world society.
All right, well, it's a very strong point. So okay, you say clearly, Neil, that Devon is a dental desert.
It is. It's one of 40 approximately across the United States.
So where's not a dental desert?
Well, there are areas where you can't get a dentist. London's quite good for getting dentists. John sort of implied that by talking about Bromley. But there are too many areas, often coastal areas, often rural areas, which simply do not have enough dentists. And that affects the NHS provision, because at the end of the day...
Bear with me a second.
Yep.
Bear with me a second. John, you've been a taxpayer.
Yep, all my life, yep.
And, you expect to have a GP. Even that's become more difficult to get a GP. I don't know what that's like in North Devon. Do you feel that having an NHS dentist is kind of a right that you've paid for?
It should be. I think the basic thing is if you don't see a dentist for over 2 years, it leads to other problems. People can get mouth cancers that don't get picked up. And I just cannot believe, to be honest, that in the last 13 years of the Conservative government, why it is now virtually impossible to get a dentist.
But you could go private, John.
As you have just stated to me, the problem with going private, it is a bottomless pit what the cost are. The reason I like going NHS, you have these 3 bands normally on NHS. You have a limit, you know what your expenditures are going to be. Whereas if you go private, I mean, it's just a bottomless pit what you can run into, isn't it, for the treatment.
So if I'm a patient, Neil, and I need a crown or whatever it is, and I simply can't get a local NHS dentist, I can go private. Doesn't it suit dentists just to be private rather than NHS? Isn't it easier for them? Isn't it simpler?
Well, I know lots and lots of dentists. I represent all the groups that are members of the association. They have associate dentists who work for them because, of course, a group, like most practices, effectively provides the facilities for dentists to operate in. The challenge is, where are the dentists? Because we need more dentists. If we were able to recruit just 1,000 more quickly, then we'd end up being able to provide 750,000 more appointments per year.
So 1,000 more dentists,
yeah.
750,000 more appointments every year.
Yeah, put it another way, the government intends, or might be clawing back unspent money on NHS. That's about 400 million. That amounts to a massive amount of unused units of dental activity, and that's all within the NHS.
So why can't we get more dentists?
We can't get more dentists. First of all, we don't train them. We don't train enough. Now, the government quite rightly has said, oh yes, let's have a long-term plan about that, but the problem is long-term, because the net result of any expansion of dental schools will not really come through until 2030. And even if it does at that late time, that might just be replacing dentists who are retiring. So what we've got to do is see a way of getting more dentists into the system.
Is it retiring, Neil? Is it? And I get the point about retiring, and people at the right point are entitled to retire.
Correct, yeah.
Or is it, rather, as we see with doctors and surgeons and many others, that actually we train lots of people who then go and work abroad?
Well, that's not actually the case. What we need is more dentists here. We've got a lot of dentists.
Sure. But what I'm saying is, that, you know, right throughout the medical sector, we find with nurses, doctors, dentists and others that people go through the training schools in this country and then go and live in Australia. Well, what I would say to that is, and funny enough, in Germany or France, there are more dentists than the United Kingdom per head of population. In fact, almost twice as many. So the argument that you know, we have enough dentists so they can go somewhere else just simply isn't stacking up. What we need to do is focus on the question of recruitment. And you asked, where are they going to come from? And clearly that's abroad. There are about, well, we don't really know the exact figure, but there's a large number of people who are trained as dentists and could practice as dentists if the General Dental Council, the GDC, responsible for the registering dentists in the United Kingdom, if they could get on with the job of facilitating their approval. Will a Labour government help them? Well, I mean, Labour have come out with big plans for this.
Any government who wants to save the NHS and make sure the NHS can deliver what is planned to be delivered, and that's effectively £3 billion worth of UDAs, must help us get more dentists into this country. So, as I've said, 1,000 more alone would give
No, the number's impressive. John, you know, the polls tell us it's going to be a Labour government. Will they solve this?
Well, I personally don't think they will. All I would say, Nigel, I think it's a catastrophic situation the government have brought about. I mean, where I'm living at the moment, there's 500 new houses at this time being built.
Yeah.
The people living in where I'm living now cannot get a dentist. And these 500 houses are going to be occupied shortly. I mean, the situation's just going from bad to worse, isn't it? No one's got any answers.
I think it is. And John, Neil, thank you. And folks, you see, whether we discuss housing, whether we discuss dentistry, we're back to the same problem. I know I'm getting boring talking about it. I'm alone in talking about it. We're living through a population explosion and we don't have the resources or the infrastructure to cope with it. I promise you.
We don't have the dentists to cope with it.
All the roads, all the schools, all the hospitals, or anything else. Net migration at 745,000. We cannot deal with any of this, in my view.